Live. Chris, it is such a pleasure to have you on here again. I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked about like hanging out with you, going to my
Heck
CLA,
yeah.
being a speaker shoulder to shoulder with you, and then learning from you. That class was awesome. It was like a master class of applying all the things that I've heard you teach before. Oh wait, I'm doubling up. Boom. All right, sorry. But
That's the worst, hearing your own voice on
yeah,
top of it.
yeah. It's like, where's that coming from? But but it was just awesome to see you weave so effortlessly, so expertly the natural farming principles, concepts, and practices into a cannabis, as particular cannabis situation that people were seeking. And it just was like so awesome to see how you're just like, oh well, it's this situation, so and you transform a lot of these things that may feel rigid to people, that may feel like this is the scale. You bend those rules, you see the principles, and you apply them to the situation appropriately. And it was really inspiring to watch. So this all began for me seeing your videos online and learning from you. And I love your YouTube still to this day. And I know that everyone anticipates your next video. And we all look forward to each new addition to that amazing library. So let's start off at the beginning. How long have you been practicing natural farming practices?
I started playing with natural farming on our farm in Hawaii in 2009. And it was incremental steps, and it's been a journey since there.
I really like how you took the time to really use and vet these practices, and and you always say, I didn't instantly become this person who's like the natural farmer. I worked into it, I tested things out, I proved it to myself, and I also got better at doing the preps. How did your perception of Korean natural farming change over that time period? Like, what was it initially? What how did you view it, and how do you view it now? Because you use it so effortlessly, so fluently now.
Yeah, I think I started very my dad's a realist, and first in a lot of things in business and in making changes. It's kind of like, okay, this might be an utter failure, and it's not. Well, we're expecting failure, or we're going to kind of half-ass it because it might fail. um it's more like, hey, this is farming. Lots of things go wrong. Let's prepare for that while we pursue success.
Mm.
And so I think with natural farming, um, it was a lot of kind of head scratching. Like, I mean, it sounds good in theory, but a lot of questions, a lot of unanswered questions, because I didn't have access to um, get my questions answered. There were no experts. And so it was, okay, let's try this. And yeah, it was through seeing it work on my farm very tangibly that I gained any confidence in natural farming. And then through kind of ripping it apart and studying it and while doing it, that I became very sure that this was the answer, or a answer, for our farm. And then eventually, I think maybe 2015, 2016, I came to believe that it was an answer for our planet, that there was a greater opportunity here than just my farm or some people's farms, but maybe that we need this. And yeah, it was definitely a journey. I saw trees recovering from disease, and that was probably my first, like, ooh, okay. all right, a little further. I'll go a little more on this. I'll try it. And then I saw drought resistance, and I was like, okay, that's a big deal. We'll go a little further. And yeah, and then ultimately it was production and yield and cost that were, they were kind of bottom line dollars and cents that really made the difference for us on our farm. And then that's kind of what makes sense everywhere in agriculture. Matt, it was really good to hang out with you in at Myceliate and get to meet you finally. It felt very short. I felt pulled in all the directions of conversation and everything, and it's kind of scattering when you have so much going on. You're like, yeah, hey, and then I see you kind of doing the same thing. So I look forward to having more chill time to wax philosophical about all the things that exist in the world that we live in next time we hang out.
Yeah, I was talking to Steve and William and a few folks about, a retreat where we all could, 30 of us could.
Cass just mentioned that to me yesterday, and yeah, she's like, Chris, we need to have a summit. Like, okay.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
So maybe we'll put that on the books.
Yeah, I think so. We got to figure that out. Someplace where we can maybe play in the snow, in between hangout sessions and then get all
play
warm.
In the snow. What about ocean? I like playing in the ocean.
Okay. All right. Both. Yeah. We could switch it up every year. I like it.
We could do both if we were on the Big Island. We can do both in the same day.
That, I mean, I don't usually talk about this, but my parents met in Hawaii, and my parents, my mom's parents lived there, and her mom's parents also lived there. And so I've never been there. And
to the Big Island.
Yeah, well, they were on Honolulu.
Yeah. Okay.
And then she went to University of Hawaii, which I don't know which island that's on.
Big Island or Oahu. Oahu's probably what makes sense. Yeah, you should definitely go.
Yeah.
One day.
Totally, absolutely. There's so many friends and so much incredible. There's so many incredible examples out there right now. So I would love to do it.
Yeah. Well, until that day.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that I'm so excited to hang out more. That was Steve was talking about on the podcast. He was like, yeah. And then like we knew we were supposed to get up at 8 and it was 2:30, but we still couldn't stop talking. And that's the truth. That's like, it was the best. So yeah, absolutely. I want to do that again. It's funny because you go to these events and sometimes it does feel like overwhelming. It feels like you're exhausted afterward, but I came home pumped. I came home like determined to like make one of these events myself, have it in Texas, invite everyone from this event to the event I want to make. And it just was like a realization. I mean, I've been to permaculture events for many, many years. I've been to farming events, eco this, eco that. But the mycology is this perfect blend of the realists, right? And the idealists. They temper their sails so well, and they're so good natured about, when things don't work out. And that keeps them it's like, that's the ultimate recovery space. You know what I mean? Like the farm mindset that your dad raised you with, that's like, we need to be ready for failures and expect failures. That's how you succeed in business. That's how you succeed in everything, really.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, are there any like limitations that you see to adapting Korean natural farming principles to everything and anything? Because from what I saw you do, it kind of made me realize like, oh, Matt, you need a library of these microbes set up exactly like the way Chris is doing it. And I'm even setting up the place in this new laboratory house I have for
Cool.
that. So I'm all in. I was explaining it to my wife, and she was like, "We have to do all of that," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah." But that's the thing. I mean, it does feel like we can take on the world. I mean, but do you see any like limitations? Like, oh, but we can't, do this. This is what we have to face, and
Absolutely. I don't see it as limitations at all, though. I wouldn't
yeah.
use that word. I'd say hurdles. There's work to be done.
Mm.
And the work I did in the cannabis industry, it was, I got paid for a job um, to establish a indoor hybrid greenhouse system on concrete and make it a robust, microbially rich, diverse ecosystem that is self-perpetuating and never needs to be swapped out. So there's this job, and it's like, okay, exactly what I want. Here's what we're putting there. And then running it for 2 years. They have staff. The staff were growing. I wasn't growing, but troubleshooting, getting the feedback, adjusting the nuance. Like now there's a system that's bulletproof, other than, if they deviate from the course, it's human components still there, um, established for that crop. And I would say that kind of protocol per crop is what's needed. Corn, for example, if you're transitioning conventional to natural farming corn, you have to come up with a sufficient spoon feeding system for 2 to 3 years. You have to continue to give that crop the level of available nitrogen that it needs to go through that vegetative and early fruit development growth, or it doesn't matter how great of a trajectory you have towards an ecosystem. When you start from conventional and you swap over, you don't have a full functioning ecosystem, in 2 months after, inoculation. And so corn's not going to have the nutrient cycling it needs from microbes and light fertilizer. So those corn is so central in the US as far as a crop goes. If we're talking about shifting the paradigm, we're going to have to give an answer for those guys. And so playing with that answer, what is the transition protocol for corn, to maintain production while shifting your system over? I don't have that. I'm playing with that with a farmer in Iowa right now, but it is a hurdle. So does it work? Yeah. Do you still get yield? Yeah. But you can't maintain the yield the first year without some spoon feeding and real spoon feeding, something that's going to make up for 30 fertilizer.
And that this is going to feed into your manual that you're writing.
Yeah. That's the idea, that there needs to be a great deal more crop specific information. I've gotten the opportunity to work in the last 3 years with, grapes and wheat, alfalfa, soy, corn, tree crops, cannabis, and it all is establishing microorganisms. But there's also there's transition protocols, there's feeding protocols, there's pest management protocols that we're kind of honing per crop. And the reason I say there's a hurdle is because ultimately you're not going to have all the pioneers. Right now we have these early adopters, these beautiful people that are like, ooh, it's about understanding. Gotcha. I'm going to assimilate this information so it goes deep and I understand it, And like you were describing, where I can kind of switch things up for that process, people are taking that on themselves. They're getting to that point of proficient understanding where they're like, I can tweak this for this crop. And they're wonderful people. That's not everybody though. A lot of farmers have been conditioned to be, here's my soil analysis and my tissue analysis, and receive back this very specific product list to purchase to put on that year. It's a very it's regimented, it's done for you almost. And so to transition that mindset, which is all over the world, we're going to need better protocol to be, here's exactly what you do, to help people navigate the learning curve, because the only real hurdle in natural farming is the learning curve. It takes a year to learn. And so if we can help people with success in that first year by reducing the learning curve from experience, and well-documented standard operating procedures or protocols, then then it's a home run. It's easy mode after that. So that's some of the work I'm up to.
Steve was saying that there are people applying Korean natural farming to generating FPJs that are at phosphorus levels that are exactly at the levels that they're selling phosphorus fertilizer at. And people are working on getting nitrogen inputs at the same rate. So, and he was talking about doing it with aquaculture and the nitrates from the fish manures. And it feels like we really could give it to them exactly like they, expect it. But it sounds like you're also saying there's another layer to this, like the spoon feeding aspect, the action of it. You don't just spray once and then you're done. You don't plant and then walk away. This is this is a conversation. This is a learning experience. It's completely different farming than a lot of these guys have experienced, right?
Yeah, and nothing new, Matt, as we know. This is something that was done. This
Yeah.
was a way. And so, like the cannabis farm, for example, once really established, now it's top dressing compost and bokashi, and it just there's this wheel happening underground. There's this engine running like a Ferrari engine at high rev, and so the nutrient cycling that's available to these plants, the stuff that's being broken down, the stuff available to these microbes so they can process all that mineral in a battery just a little lower in the soil is, I mean, it's there, it's happening, and it becomes, really automatic or easy in a lot of ways. It'll
And that's
spoil the farmer.
and that's IMO compost. I just want people to clarify that.
Not necessarily. So once you establish that soil, you're able then to just top dress it with almost unfinished materials, because there's so much worms, there's so much life that's disappearing in 2-3 days. Everything's gone. So you're just mulching and top dressing and mulching and top dressing, and you're just feeding this system right now. Think about it as putting gas in the tank for the Ferrari. The
Wow,
Ferrari's
that's
got the
wonderful because so many people worry about being on this endless train of buying the highest quality compost. But to develop it IMOs, develop it with indigenous microbes, and then to be able to use your compost, even if you're not like the compost wizard, the worms and the IMOs themselves, between the two of them, they're a catch-all, and they're a safety measure on all of this, especially the worms. I only learned this, and I had heard students say it, but I hadn't seen the studies. But the fact that worms are a failsafe on pathogens, so a few
worms
weeks
don't
with
allow E. coli in their presence. Yeah.
right, and so this is just really exciting because folks don't understand. Even I didn't understand initially when we started this journey. Like, I mean, I wrote that first book with those handful of preps in it that you were demonstrating on YouTube like 6 years ago. I really didn't understand, And you, again, you were so patient about it. But that's the thing, is it's like, this is the way we turn off our self-reliance. I mean, our reliance upon these petrochemicals. And this is how we turn on local resilience.
Yeah, I get the great privilege of going down to Costa Rica next week, because somebody got paid a bunch of money to plant 12,000 trees, and they planted like 3,500, and they're all dying, and they're all root bound, and the soil wasn't prepared. And so to, go down and teach this group of farmers how to do this while I do it, and then leave, it's a 3-month project, leave, and them have everything they need to maintain the health that's established while they plant the rest of these trees, and have no need for imports, have no need for, more things. But here's your tools, here's your containers, here's your lab, here's how you run it, and do that, and you're good for the next 10 generations. That concept is one I've come to love. I love the idea of aid that is self-perpetuating and sovereign for farmers. So yeah, it's I think that can be established for giant ag as well. Same system. We're proving that.
It's almost an impossible wealth. It's like, how we say things are invaluable. It's like the wealth of you know what I mean? The worth of a human life is inestimable. The potential and fertility of the earth is the same. We've just created this system where we've hidden the actual attributes of nature from ourselves, and hidden the true pathways to connection from ourselves. It's
Yeah.
beguiling.
Well, and it is, but it's also, and I would say that as a organic farmer before I got natural farming, it was discouraging. It,
I'm
it
sure.
was it was it was defeating, that we're doing all these things right, everything that we've been told that you need to do for organic agriculture, and then to have it just be failing and not profitable, not sustainable. And now um, to have a means of understanding nature. I think
Mm.
that's where I come continually, and I'll repeat this. I think maybe everywhere I talk about it, but is that the real power of natural farming is the understanding, the kind of key to understanding that it can create for a farmer, where okay, I have this, I play with it a little bit, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I get how nature does this thing. I can, yes, I can follow this rigid protocol that is laid out in natural farming. And I think part of the reason, man, and it's maybe a little subconscious, that I haven't made more videos is it's like, here's the simple. If I do talk about all the things, and there's lots of things to talk about, then everybody's off to this little section, and they're going to miss the simple. But I think what I hope and what I see, and I've seen over and over, is people getting this concept, and then all of a sudden it's like the light bulb's there and it's always on. And now they're like, I get how nature does these things, and I'm just working with nature to do these things. And now I can ad lib a little bit because I actually understand it, and it's not the understanding of, I know the, DNA profiles of everything in my compost, that I have this massive, elaborate, high science tech laid out where I'm, you know, splicing and selecting. It's this, you know, 30,000 foot view of nature does this, and I can foster it and tend to it and benefit from it. And this is a viable way to farm. And that understanding, when that kind of dawns for a farmer, it's kind of like, all right, cool. Have fun with that. Good luck. You know, you need nothing else. Um, and and that doesn't mean there's not a whole lot more to learn. I continue to learn things just about natural farming that boggle my mind. But it's it is a pretty amazing thing to see, and it's amazing to see. Um, it's very satisfying to see in a place where there's no clouding of high science. They're the simplest farmers in, you know, Cambodia or the hill tribes of Myanmar, and they literally, they take it, they watch how it works, and then they're like, we're just going to do this, you
Yeah.
know. And that's I think that kind of reality can sweep across the world in a pretty revolutionary way.
And what's so fantastic is it does two things. It, on top of that, in response to the whole high science thing, it does two things very, very well. It demonstrates how we can, with very simple hands-on action, participate in the highest forms of science.
Yeah, like you were
And
talking about.
yeah, and then it also, I would say, is so incredible because it really works so that simplicity scales up to the highest levels of science. And because it does that, and because it's stuff that we just didn't do, stuff that, I mean, we're working with sterilized plants, you know, for the past 50 years, right? And sterilized soils. We now know that sterilized soils and sterilized plants don't grow root hairs. You need the microbes there. So this is something that is teaching the highest levels of science the actual laws and boundaries of the natural processes and cycles. And so it's humbling, as nature should always be, right? That's to me always a sign that like we're in the presence of nature. You know, you go out into the wilderness, you know, you go up in the mountains and you're like, whoa, it's like that's the sign. And it's the same thing when you're growing stuff or you see a tree bounce back and you thought it was going to die. You recognize something's, I mean, I just did that, but that's not me doing that. That's
Yeah,
nature. That's
yeah,
me doing exactly what nature wanted me to do. And it feels so good. It feels so right.
yeah.
So, yeah. And speaking of those kinds of things where sometimes you go out on a limb, sometimes you discover things. I was talking to Steve about Super Lab, and that was such a happy accident and such an incredible discovery. How did you figure out that it was provolone sulfur bacteria that it was expressing in there?
So that is actually Steve's brainchild. Though I was talking about food, we would talk a lot. We talked a lot before, more less recently. We've been busy, but in the early days, there's a lot of conversation about what could be. And one of the biggest kind of question mark, exciting questions to ask in natural farming for me is, as I play with substrates and different foods, how can we affect that diversity, that swath? How can we better foster transferring and cultivating that natural ecosystem? And those conversations, Steve started playing with, and so um, he added, what's that seaweed he added?
He added blue spirulina.
He added spirulina to the LAB process, and he got a indigenous culture of microbes that like that food. and they ran away with it. And then he did his analysis and just shared it with me. So definitely gets all the kudos for that discovery play.
He
But
told
yeah.
he told me to ask you in light of that, because I asked him about that. Yeah, he said I should ask you about IPMO.
Yeah. Have you heard that before?
I hear the name being dropped here and there, and I don't know what it is, but it's always associated with you. So I would love to hear about it with everyone for the first time.
It's again kind of a nature learning. So many things I learned by being on the farm. I'm farming 750 acres. We need to make it work, and I'm failing uphill, basically,
Mm.
through blood, sweat, and tears. I don't have um, a teacher for scaling, and all of this, and I'm succeeding and failing and moving forward with the learning from the failures. And so I had a busy work time. I was making my liquid IMO. Actually, I was making a new batch of IMO3. I had run out of IMO for making my liquid IMO for spraying my trees. And so I'm making a new batch. I go to this stockpile of substrate I have, because I have a lab with all my materials in it. They're all ready for me whenever I need. I just walk in there and I can make anything for my farm. And that's really, I think, the key for natural farming. If you want to farm this way, set yourself up with a lab where everything's there. And that is getting over the hump of it feeling hard. All of a sudden it feels easy. So the lab is the key, which is the next video I need to make, Matt, which is how to set up your lab and get yourself ready for.
That's what I'm doing right now. I'm like, and I'm like wondering, like, should it be like extra dry? Could I put it in the cupboards in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like
Yeah.
figuring out where to put it.
Give all the ideas, help you guys not have so many questions. But I'm in my lab. I got my substrate. However, it's Hawaii. And so I've got weevils now in my substrate. I pour it into my box to start mixing everything, and it's full of these little beetles.
Yeah.
They're little tiny black things in my grain. And I'm like, oh, darn it. Can I stop? And I'm like, I'm 40 minutes to where I would buy more grain. And I got a full work day and a busy farming week. And so I'm like, no, we'll just let them go. And so I make my IMO3, and it's finishing up. I'm exploring it, looking at all the chunks of fuzz and mycelium that's invaded this whole swath of material. And I see all these little white puffballs. And every time I find a weevil, they're covered in a white puffball, little fuzz, like little cotton balls. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Very curious. I wish I could stop and throw this all under my microscope and spend a day and a half researching it, but I don't have time right now. So I throw it in the storage bin. I make my liquid IMO, get it started. That's going out in 36 hours on the tractor. One of my staff is spraying that out. I am walking through the spray swath that my staff sprayed, just as a good farmer, observing the work and walking through the trees. How did the trees react? Did we knock off flowers? And all the things. And I see in some of the crook of the trees, I see some puffballs. I see white little puffballs on green stink bugs, which is one of our main pests. It almost took our business out before. It's this little beetle with a carapace, and it's covered in the same fuzz my weevils were covered in. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What's happening here? And so I could not resist. At that point, I went full dive into beetles and pathogens and all this thing, only to discover that the leading pathogen for carapace insects and beetles in general are fungi.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see some of the scale we have. We have this thing, white felted coccyid, and there's little bits on our farm that they were predated on. They were being eaten by some of the bugs, and there was also a fuzz that got on some of them. And so I logged that away. It was like, oh, okay, so I am taking cultures from the wild, and by adding a substrate that they like to eat, which is that like chitinase protein that they're multiplying in my process of turning and keeping aerobic, and that I can actually get transfer through a liquid foliar application of that pest management organism. And that was like, I was excited. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't talk about it. I was farming. And really, I didn't make any videos. I didn't teach until I was handing off my management to my younger brother and moving away from the farm, which was 2015, 2016, really 2014. I started teaching. And so Steve calls me up and he's like, Chris, Zimbabwe here. I've got this big, project on 300 acres, and the locusts are coming through. We're getting destroyed by grasshoppers. It's marching through the farm. It's killing my hemp project, and I got this big important field. I'm like, here's something. He's like, what can we do in natural farming? I was like, well, here's something I discovered a few years ago. Da, 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 da. And I laid out the whole thing. And I was like, so try it a couple ways here. You can try it with an IMO1 collection where you put the beetles material in that rice box that you're putting out in nature. So you're cultivating in something on food that they would like to eat, and try it like I did, that IMO3. And so he tried it both ways. He said he felt like it was more effective. He got better growth on the carapace when he did it with the IMO1, and then grew it out with IMO3. And then he sprayed his field with the liquid IMO from this, and he had grasshopper die off and then prevention. The rest of the farm continued to get the pressure and got eaten by a lot of grasshoppers. And his section that he sprayed, this hemp project that he sprayed with liquid IMO, with the IPMO in it, he had no more damage, and he went full crop, no damage. So since then, we've played with it. Other people have played with it on their farms, and we've had very similar success where we can wildcraft Bacillus thuringiensis, or no, what's the beetle thing they sell? Bavaria bassiana. Bavaria bassiana is all over the world. It's in all kinds of places. We find it in so many soil types. It's slightly different than the one they made for the lab. It's a patented product because it's a specific strain. However, not all of it's exactly DNA the same. And so there's indigenous versions, but then there's also things that predate, that are predatory to beetles that aren't that specific microbe. There's lots of other things that eat it. And so it's simple tech. It's a very, and it's again back to that, what is the food source we're providing to cultivate the microbe we want?
And I would hazard to say that it's even a little bit more than just the food source, because of the process of doing IMOs. As you scale up, you speed up, like the aggressiveness of the microbiology. Like when you're doing the higher level IMOs, I mean, it's it's so fast at times. And that's why it's so effective in a farming situation. Like, so I knew Organics Alive had this product years ago where they were feeding like insect frass to worms, and they were like super secret about the fact it was insect frass. And so they're making chitosan, right? And so they were able to take down the chitin, and they're making chitinase. And so they were able to take down all these different bugs and everything. But I'm sure that product was hyper limited because they're feeding them like insect substrate to get, and it's just out of the worms. And then the consistency of it, it's like you got to wait for the worms to do their work. It's like a few months and you're getting there, you're getting there. Farmers lose an entire season that way. But the fact that you can, I mean, it seems like once you've got your library up, you can turn around and pivot and react and change the course within days or a week, and at most a week, for almost every single thing that you need to do in reaction once your library is going.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Yeah, yeah, it is, because it's such, and that's where there's learning curve. IMO is so nuanced, and it requires this very specific process. And but the process is all about creating this ideal environment for fungal growth. It's and it's really where the difference is. That's why I believe this works, is because we're so able to produce this kind of inoculum, a really effective inoculum. That's, the preps, the ferments, there's things similar in the world that people do. There's nothing like IMO.
Mhm.
IMO is this really excellent process. And the change since it came to the US, the change I got to do with bringing in humic acid and um, carbon material to the instruction has, I think, really made all the difference in getting it fungal, and because if you're, and this is back to what are you growing and what is the protocol for what you're growing. If you're growing rice, then you can really, um, Bacillus subtilis can be literally this microbe that you run your farm with. It's the need is there for this microbe to be running away with your rice paddy, and it makes everything work. That isn't the case for trees. We need the
Mhm.
fungus. It isn't the case for cannabis. And so, to be able to, and so with a slightly different feed mix, to be able to create something that's a little more row crop friendly or a little more tree friendly. Yeah, but yeah, the process is beautiful. It's something that nature does, caring for the aerobic nature of it and getting a really balanced food. Um, yeah, so I think it's something also, that can be kind of incorporated, almost like a widget for a website. It can be incorporated into other farming practices. People that are big into compost, or people that are big into, Johnson Sioux bioreactor. You want to take a Johnson Sioux bioreactor, just natural farmify it, and add your IMO collections to the Johnson Sioux bioreactor, your IMO3. Now you have established diverse microbial community in your, rather than just whatever is on the substrate that you throw in there. And that will self-perpetuate because worms work with it. So you can kind of take this tech and plug it into, because I think pretty much once you establish diverse microbial life in your ag land, you can just compost, um, and you can do these kind of bigger material production systems, but you're just adding in your inoculum now. You're just continuing the natural farming tech, but you're just, salt and peppering your casserole with diverse microbial life.
And because you're sourcing it from the actual area, you're not bringing something that's going to senesce and then leave. Like effective microbes, one of the selling points is that it doesn't stick around. It senesces and is eaten by the IMOs. So it's like, why not just make the IMOs?
Yeah, but those products, they work for people.
Mhm.
They get 6 months of, nutrient cycling boost, and they apply it again. They can see the outcome of their purchase. And so, I think, I'm really careful not to knock on those things, because they're a gateway drug to IMOs, if you will. They're
And
they're
they're in
like,
IMOs. There's just a lot
yeah,
more in IMOs.
yeah,
Yeah, that's so it's so vital to see, I think the ability for it to be applied in multiple areas. What you were recently in Ireland, right? And you were working with dairies. So how does this apply there?
Yeah, I actually was just on the phone with Tom Stack from Ireland this morning, a bit earlier, and he's taking some of that IMO3 we made while we were there and making IMO4 and talking about how it's going. He's got so much interest, so much excitement going on in Ireland around natural farming because by a huge part of the excitement comes from he's crushing it. They have like 4 weeks of drought right now, and everybody's grass is brown except his. His is lush and green and rich, and he's doing strip grazing and mowing, and he's you know he says that these guys come to this farm and they're kind of like confused a little by his explanation. He's explaining things, and he's kind of like he doesn't feel like he has all their attention, and then they go out and look at the grass and they won't leave. And I'm like, maybe Tom, you start your talk with the grass, go show them the grass, and then you explain how, because then they're asking all the questions and all the things he
Yeah.
said, they're trying to pull it all out of his brain. But no, he's had a ton of success. He came out to a class in Connecticut and then just went back and did it. He didn't like stop for air, nothing. He just switched his farm over to natural farming, and he's paying himself. I said, Tom, but the important question is, are you paying yourself? He's like, yeah. And we started laughing, and he's like, but my mower broke yesterday, so that's 11,000. You get kicked
Oh,
in the balls, get kicked in the balls as a farmer. I said, yeah, that's the part you can't teach with natural farming. You can't teach people how to have steel balls for getting kicked over and over, because that'll happen. It's part of it. So I think natural farming being something that's this constant and is profitable, well, you already have to deal with all the crap that's going to come at you just from nature as well, and equipment failure, and a fence broke, and all the things. But yeah, it works really well in Ireland. In Ireland, you have a lot of smallholder farmers. They didn't get as much of the chemical fertilizer kind of developing there because they were a little behind. So they're like a generation ahead of us in the transition. And I think that if I had to guess, they're probably ground zero for the developed world having a revolution of sorts.
that's unbelievable. I was an
So
Irish
I'm going to
studies
go back next
minor.
year.
Oh, my boys want to go so bad. I was an Irish studies minor. So Ireland is in my blood, but also deeply in my heart. So just being practical about this. So you're doing IMO treatments on the grasses, but are you also, giving like lab to the cows?
Um, So yeah, there's a few things you can do for dairy. The main thing, the 80% of your effort or 80% of your return comes from this very easy process, which is spraying liquid IMO on grass. So he's got two brew tanks going, and twice a week he's getting his liquid IMOs because he's got like 130 acres to cover. So he's just keeps getting it out, rain or shine, and that is establishing this life, and which goes to work every morning, every evening, 24 hours a day. They're working on a healthy ecosystem. Now the cows used to come in after eating grass all day, and they bay for, as Tom would say, the poison, the kind of your haze and your GMO, feeds, and so they'd feed it. That's the conventional system. And he said now they go out and they eat for 3 hours or so, and they sit around and chew their cud. They're not eating all day because they've become nutrient satisfied. Their grass
Mm.
is satisfying their bellies, so they don't need to run around and eat. and they don't come in and bay for the food. They're chewing their cud in the evenings. He doesn't feed them to bring them into the milking parlor. They just walk in, chewing their cud, and let them eat. It's super peaceful. I have some videos on my Instagram of the cows just hanging out there. They're not getting fed anything, and they're just sitting to be milked. It's just their thing. And so he had the initial thing where he stopped antibiotics. And so he didn't try and save the cows that got sick. A few of his cows got sick, and he didn't do a bunch of things when they were calving. And the cows, he calls them, he says the calves that were his first round of calves from that process of switching over to natural farming, he says they're bulletproof. They don't have the pull down from getting sick. They don't have the things that his previous generation of cows had. And so he's established this herd now where he doesn't have to chase them with antibiotics. He washes their teats with apple cider vinegar, and lab is something that's coming in now after milking, where you give them a spray of lab on their teats. Liquid IMO goes into their poop trough. So they have like a grate where the poop falls through and the urine. And so he keeps that, and he's letting it cure for months. The farmers are trying to get it out because they want storage. He's letting it cure because it doesn't smell. And so he's letting it cure and process with microbes, and then he's putting it out, and he's putting it out light so that so it's not hurting microbial activity and not getting all bacterial imbalance for a short time. And but really it's the grass, Matt. These cows have nutrient rich food, no poisons, and they're healthy and they're productive. His milk fats have all gone up. He's getting paid more because he's organic farm, and he's making his own silage. And his silage, the normal average for silage is 7 to 9. His silage is 18 in bricks.
Woo.
And so he doesn't buy any more feed. He just makes his own silage with now all this excess grass he has. And it's amazing food for his animals. And so the whole system is why it works. But the cows are healthy because they have the best food. And that's what we need, humans. We need our grocery stores to be full of medicine because it's all grown natural farming. And then we're not chasing all the stuff. We're not chasing all the things to make ourselves feel better.
How do you feel like when you see these headlines say that like there's a nitrogen fertilizer shortage and there's, food shortages coming?
I'm just kicking myself that I'm not more prepared online for everybody to have the answer, that I don't have more information out there or a book or
we're doing it now.
Headline.
We're doing it now though.
Yeah. So I just, it's going to come. We're going to have food crises because this systems, we have a broken ag system, a destructively broken one. And we produce food for the masses, which is great. And farmers are doing a great job of, getting that done. There's so much ingenuity and hard work that goes into our food production. So in saying we have a broken system, I'm no way knocking the work of the farmer. I mean, they're crushing it. They're producing. One farmer can produce a quantity by weight of food that we've never seen in the history of mankind, because of the mechanization and all that. And so we're there in one way at the pinnacle of our production. And the other way, we have a really broken system to do that. So I think it's going to be really stressful for a lot of people. And I think we're going to see real hunger, real starvation. And sadly, it'll be in the places that aren't as privileged as we are here in the US. And yeah. So I'm starting an India project.
Awesome.
Speaking of, yeah, there's a group that their kind of heart is to keep the land in the hands of the poorest farmers while supporting them and providing them with buyers and farm tech that allows them to be sustainable. So I'm excited about that. I've always wanted to go to India.
Yeah, I mean, where have you gone? What places have you been able to visit as a consultant?
Um, Cambodia, Thailand several times, Burma, Myanmar a few times. Um, Definitely learning in Korea, went to Korea 11 times. But otherwise, mostly in the US, mostly different places around here. Um, Got to work with some First Nation tribes in the US. And yeah, but a lot of remote work through the internet. I've been able to have real mentorship with guys in Africa. There's a guy in Africa, no social media presence or hardly at all, but he's got a like 8,000 bird chicken coop, like 1,000 piggery. Like he is a like relatively wealthy farmer, and he took the videos online of natural farming and did it, and he is crushing it. And he asked me questions periodically, really good questions, and he's just farming with this tech full tilt and making a great livelihood for himself. And there's people like that. I was working with a project in Uganda, and gave them real simple tech to get going, and they were doing really well. And then my good friend Ray Yoon jumped in. He was involved with Master Cho and Cho Yun Sun for a while, and now he lives in Canada, kind of does his own thing. He's a Tai Chi master, but he likes Jadam. And so he's just saw them through the network, connected with them, and has volunteered to go out there. And he's been out there working with them, doing stuff in Africa. And so, yeah, I've gotten to kind of remotely help a bunch of places in the world. And I get questions all the time from different places, but I haven't gotten to go. And I think there's lots of people that will be going in the future here. We can just support them. So that's one of the main things on the horizon for me, is helping to facilitate the infrastructure of a network so that that work can continue beyond. I can't do that alone. So that a lot of these really good natural farmers that are developing can go and freely share.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I was thinking about you developing your own database as well around natural farming adaptations would be incredible.
Yeah, that would be a really, really good thing. That's yeah. We'll just have to keep teaming up, Matt, because I think you're pretty amazing at some of the things you create. So once you create your soil database, maybe you'll have some time to go help me out.
Heck yeah. Well, I got got to make it. I'm in the middle of like trying to suss that all out. There's like all these layers to that. So, what, speaking of going big, speaking of going wild, what if you had all the resources in your hands, if you had unlimited money, you had, the ability to be funded, what would you do?
Um, I would hire a team from students, and establish learning labs probably all over the world. Um, Setting up indigenous farmers to be the farms that the learning labs are on, and giving them support to be the teachers of their area, where I wouldn't bring over any tech or supplies to those countries. We would just use whatever we could find easily in place and set them up with basically natural farming in their language by a farmer in their country,
Mhm.
and we'd create a support network for those teachers, to show and example the health of it. I would also set up a research facility, a real, and that's where I'd have a bunch of nerdy natural farmers running it, where we're asking all these questions I want to know the answer to.
Heck
And
yeah.
and what else?
I think this
And
is all
probably
possible.
probably make a much better online free education system.
Heck yeah. Speaking of that, you have your website, it's naturalfarming.co, right?
ChrisTrump.com right now, but I
Okay.
might change that eventually. But yeah, it's just ChrisTrump.com. And what else were you gonna ask? Sorry.
I was just gonna talk about what other videos, what other resources where folks can find you.
Yeah,
Because I know
a lot of
you have a new course, right?
yeah, I have an online course, and there's more being added to that all the time. I've been really behind on adding to it, but it's a full 40-hour course. Video you can watch over and over. Anytime I add to it, it's a lifetime membership, so anything that gets added later is all yours as well. That you get a certificate, a proficiency certificate, saying you've gone through the hours, and you're encouraged to teach an introductory course or teach some of what you learned. So you get a certificate showing your work. And yeah, that's can be found under the courses tab at christrump.com. I am going to make OHN and FAA available on my website again here in the next month. I stopped doing that as I was traveling too much to fulfill those orders, but I have a friend that wants to fulfill those orders, and we've made hundreds of gallons of both that are ready, just kind of waiting to be put online. And
Nice.
yeah, and then I'm going to be sharing some of what I'm up to in Costa Rica via my Instagram, and if I can get it together, Twitter. But I think that project will be very entertaining to watch. So I encourage people to jump on. I'm at Soil Steward on Instagram, and just give a follow so you can watch some of that fun stuff as we tackle revitalizing the trees, but also setting them up with a lab for perpetuity.
I appreciate how much content you have shared and provided for everyone. And I am going to I'm going to be building that lab. I'm building that library of microbes. I was explaining it to my wife. I was like, you have this compost, you've got all these different things, but it's nothing like the clarity and the the precision of having a library of inputs in Korean natural farming. It's like there's nothing equivalent to it. And so I was just explaining, I was like, we have to dedicate this area of the house.
Oh, geez. I've had those conversations. Yes, we
Yeah.
need an extra room in the house for children, but I also need this room for ferments.
Yeah, just ferments. So I'm doing it, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of the incredible library of information that Chris provides on his website. The YouTube's great. Subscribe to his YouTube. Join the 43,000 other people that love it. But go to his website as well, because the way it's organized, the recipes are laid out. You're going to end up like printing things out. You're going to end up signing up to his mailing list. You're going to probably sign up to the course. I'm a member of his course as well. It's fabulous. So support Chris any way you can. Follow Chris everywhere he is. And this is just the beginning. The work you're doing is today, and that you've been doing, is all seeds for something that I see is going to just be like floodgates at a certain point. When we hit that tipping point, people are going to be like, oh, how stupid were we? And it's going to be all these crazy, wild, and fun adaptations, and people that we've never met are going to rise and be heroes and stars. And there's going to be so much variety and diversity. It's going to be the new regenerative world. So thank you
Yeah,
so much, Chris.
we're gonna make the farmers the rock stars.
That's right. That's right. It's already happening. I mean, Jean-Martin Fortier is like a TV star now, much more than he's a
Nice,
farmer, I think. So
very
it's
cool.
real and it's happening.
Matt, I love you, man, and I appreciate your work and the support of having such a wonderful peer in this space. So keep it up, man. Keep smiling, and thank you for sharing your overflow with all of us. It was really good fun hanging out.
It's always so much fun hanging out. We have to do it again in person. We have to make this summit happen. I'm just honored to know you, and it's going to be so fun to see your adventures in Costa Rica and to see everything that comes forward. Thank you, Chris. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for being patient with the technical difficulties, the late start, but this was a regenerative future. Thank you so much. Grow abundantly, learn daily, and live regeneratively. I'm Matt Powers. Have a good day, everyone.
See you guys.